the thing about coaching is you're best as a coach when you are not at the center of the relationship. When so coaching, I can say more about what exactly I mean by coaching, but really the upshot of what I think effective coaching does is it takes the client and centers them radically. So what they want, what they are like, how they can make progress.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Ballara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Rory Tyer. Rory is an executive coach and leadership development expert who helps business owners and their leaders get clear on what they want to achieve, the growth that they need to get there. Rory, I apologize right off the bat for mispronouncing your last name, but I should have paid more attention to that. I'm embarrassed.
It
So I
happens all the time.
apologize, but thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for taking out the time. Hopefully you can forgive me and we can move past it to have a great conversation. But genuinely, thank you very much.
Oh man, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with just, kind of hearing about you, hear your background, tell us your story, and then we'll just dive in from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So currently I work for a pretty large professional services and accounting firm called Horn. I work fully remotely. I live here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm married. Our 10-year anniversary is next May. We've got 3 daughters, a couple of dogs. And Horn is in like 14 states and Puerto Rico and DC. And I am an executive coach. And so I work as part of a small team called Accelerate. And we work with primarily construction and manufacturing companies. I work directly with leaders and owners. My emphasis is on executive coaching and leadership development of intact groups and teams. But then I end up sort of helping out other aspects of our teams in different kinds of conversations. The route to get here was a little circuitous. I'll give you kind of the highlights. So back in the day, I actually went to seminary. So my life was on a very different track. I thought I was going to get my master's, get a PhD and teach. And I got really burned out in academia. And right about the time I got really burned out, I got an opportunity to work in the marketing department for the university system. And that opportunity did a number of things. It was one of those, like, it sent me on my first work trip. My boss was an amazing leader who valued flexibility and results more than, having a butt in a seat. I got to teach myself videography. We get to totally overhaul how we marketed the system, and it was really great. That led to a couple of opportunities, which eventually I moved. I was in the Chicago area at the time, became vice president of marketing for a nonprofit after that for several years. And through that, and particularly through the CEO that I was working with, he became a mentor, very good friend. He introduced me to the world of leadership development. He had a long career before that in a very large global leader development company called the Center for Creative Leadership. And we co-founded a consultancy together, he and I and a couple others. And eventually we stepped away from the nonprofit to focus on that consultancy full time. And then Horn, my current firm, actually really hired me to build a high potential leader development program. So Horn went through significant, like 300% growth in a short span of time, had a cohort of prospective partners that needed to be developed. And so that's what brought me to Horn. So I was a consultant for about 9 to 10 months of that program, and they offered me a full-time role, and it just was a great fit. And so I've been working for them remotely ever since. And so my coaching, I would, just to sum that up, I'd say my vocation is coaching. The ability to sit down and have that one-on-one impactful relationship with someone over 6 to 12 months is the thing that matters most to me and that I enjoy most. And then I get to kind of have my hands on lots of different kinds of projects because of my work right now.
Yeah, it sounds like a super interesting sort of path, but also just what you're doing at this point is I'm sure fascinating and also I would imagine, kind of inspiring, invigorating to coach people and have, kind of see their growth. I think
Hmm.
that was a thing that
Yeah.
I, I'm a veterinary surgeon. I used to train residents when I worked as a W-2 job, and it was
Mm.
just like that was one of the things that became really like the highlight of my
Yeah.
job. But that point was like seeing people over that span of time,
Hmm.
sort of just get better at the things that you're teaching them. So,
Yeah.
but it does sound like a kind of roundabout way to get there. Do you feel like that was something that always came naturally to you? Was that something you had to really kind of learn, a process for coaching, or is just something you kind of developed on your own?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I, going back to even when I was young, I think I had the ability to get up in front of people and speak. Like it never, I wasn't really ever afraid of it. A long part of my past that I didn't talk about was I was in a band for a long time, and there's still a bunch of my music online. But so getting up, in front of a room is not a big deal to me. Coaching, I think the thing that I had was I really enjoyed asking people questions to clarify what they meant. There was always something where I was like, I want to understand really what you mean, because I feel like we're not, like if I'm in a meeting and I feel like everybody's just dancing around something, I tend to be the one who's like, let's talk, like, what are we really talking about? And so I had a friend who I was doing some work together with a nonprofit, and we had done a session. And after the session, she turned to me and she was like, I think you could be a good coach, but you need training. It was like very direct, and it was awesome. And so I ended up going through a formal program, and then part of getting your the International Coaching Federation is the largest global accrediting body for coaches. And the word coaching can mean anything. There's a
Right.
lot of people that do, and that's fine. It's the internet, it's marketing, that's great. That for me, coaching means I've been through a pretty rigorous certification process that I had to put in hundreds of hours of coaching. I had to demonstrate that I understand a code of ethics, and I had to submit recordings, and people judge them, and I'm actually in that process right now to step up to the next two of three levels. And so to me, that was really what opened the door. Was I got that feedback, I think you could be a good coach, you really need work. And I'm glad she did that, because it led me to something that once I was in it, I realized, oh, and so the thing I would say is, you heard me say earlier, I liked being in front of people. The thing about coaching is you're your best as a coach when you are not at the center of the relationship. When so coaching, I can say more about what exactly I mean by coaching, but really the upshot of what I think effective coaching does is it takes the client and centers them radically. So what they want, what they are like, how they can make progress. And so it was actually really healthy for me, even on like a moral and spiritual level, to go through that training, because it decentered me. Like I had a lot of ego, and I got a lot of enjoyment from being the person at the front of the room. And that had to get broken down. Otherwise I wouldn't be a good coach. And that's not all gone, but when I'm in coaching mode, that kind of goes to the background, and I'm able to elevate somebody else in a very, very specific way, where a lot of coaches, what they're really doing is teaching a method, or they're consulting, or they're mentoring. And that's fine. Those things are great, but that's not what I would call pure coaching, where it's radically client centered.
And you're coaching in a like a one-on-one scenario, or you're coaching to, I know sometimes with like corporate coaching and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's like group, one to many, but
Yes,
you're in, sort of a one-on-one scenarios with your
I do
clients. Is
both.
that okay?
Yeah, I do both. So typically what it looks like is a leadership team will hire me and other team members. So usually we're doing a bunch of stuff. Maybe they'll have somebody acting as a fractional CFO, or a managed accounting team, or even some marketing folks. And then there's some people solution stuff as part of that. And so I'll coach two or three members of a leadership team. And then I'll also lead kind of monthly group coaching or leader development. And so leader development is more curriculum driven, where we've got frameworks that we want to help them apply to improve themselves in their business. Group coaching is more of like, okay, we have an intact team and y'all are doing okay, but you need to hear and speak with one another more effectively. And so I'm not coming in to teach them something. I'm more helping them have a more productive conversation. And the hope there is that once I leave, they've developed like new muscle memory for having more effective meetings and working through disagreement. Because I don't want them to need me. I want them to really depend on each other long term. So I get to do both. I think the one-on-one is a little more satisfying, because you just get to see like those aha moments where somebody's like, oh my gosh, I've been thinking this thing for a while and I didn't know how to say it. And then they can think it and then act on it. That's really satisfying.
Yeah. So you said something there that I find interesting, and I want to kind of ask you a question that. So you said I don't want them to need me,
Hmm.
and th- so and this is not to offend therapists and things like that, but I feel like sometimes you get in a coaching or a therapy type situation, and it I'm the type of person that wants to like find resolution. That
Hmm.
like if whether it's for coaching, I want to get better at something.
Yeah.
You specifically said I don't want them to need you, and it's an interesting, can kind of almost take this both ways. Like, for example, if you look at like a strength and conditioning type coach,
Yeah.
you kind of do need them. You want to sort of go on and you want to have continued. So how is that? I think it's different, depending on
Sure.
which area of life you're
Yeah.
actually trying to impact. But because you said that, I wanted to kind of get your take on, sort of, do you think there's a certain amount of time that you're coaching these folks that's the right amount of time, or how does that factor into your decision and how you're approaching specific clients?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think it's interesting to play around with those different kinds of support. So I would think of coaching as a support profession, right? And so there's a lot of support. So it's important for me to distinguish what I do from therapy as an example. But it's broadly, it's like a supporting profession. And so, I think we do 6 month or 12 month um, engagements. And some of that is just a way to force even some artificial, like when I used to work in fundraising, one of the keys to effective fundraising is to have a deadline. Even if it's
Yeah,
not real, the sense of urgency will go up and you'll get more donations if you have a deadline. Well, similarly with coaching, it's kind of hard just to say, well, like someday I'd like to do this. And so when I'm setting goals, it's helpful to say we have 6 months together. So I want you to think ahead 6 months from now, what could we accomplish that would make you feel incredible?
yeah,
And then there's a natural off ramp. I've had people re-up once, twice, for longer sessions. And then, you know, a major part of the work in coaching is raising someone's self-awareness. And so to your question about how long is too long, I know that I've done my job if they get to a point where they become self-aware enough to either recognize I still need this or I need to take a break. Because coaching can be intense. Like you're meeting every other week for about an hour.
yeah,
There's not a curriculum, but the goal of every conversation is that they walk away having decided here's one or two things I need to do or try. And then at the beginning of the next conversation, we're reviewing that together. Whether you fail or do great, there's always something you can learn. And so that becomes kind of a flywheel of progress if it's working well. And that's a lot, depending on the season you're going through, you may just need to step back from that level of accountability. So I don't know that there's a one size fits all. I mean, if I were gonna, when I've worked with people who've helped me like improve my form and working out or something like that, like I want to learn such that I don't have to have them. But I think the key is accountability, and that's where a coach,
right,
everybody needs accountability, and sometimes a coach is that best accountability. Sometimes if your team is working really well together, they become that accountability. Sometimes you build a habit and you are your own accountability. So I don't know that there's one right answer, but I think a lot of consultants in general get a bad rap because they either deliver a report and then walk away and aren't actually helping with accountability. Like a strategic planning, like here's your strategic plan, it's in a binder, and then no one does anything with it because they don't actually know how. Or here's
right,
your new brand package, but there's no like social media plan and content development.
yeah,
Um, so that's one end of the spectrum. And then I think the other end is consultants who really do cultivate dependence and they're not actually creating SOPs that can be left behind and trained internally. And I don't want either of those things to happen. I want to do really well and I want to do it for a defined period of time as long as it's helpful, and then leave behind something better, than, and by better, I mean people who are more internally, whether it's inside their team or inside themselves, more internally capable to solve problems.
yeah. No, that's great. I think that, to me, I think you're right. The defined period of time, sort of creating um, that inherent urgency and
Hmm.
in having a deadline, I think is definitely important.
Can I
Um,
ask you a follow-up question to that? I'm curious, like,
yeah,
where have you seen Uh, I'm curious for your experience, where have you seen either of those extremes at work? Like either the I'm going to drop you some knowledge and get paid and walk away, or the
Yeah.
I'm going to cultivate dependence where really like you're going to need us the whole time. Like I'd be curious what your either personal experience or what you're aware of with either of those. Cause I really try hard to avoid that, but I know there's a
Yeah.
lot of that out there.
Yeah. Again, this is not to disparage therapists. I think they work for some people well. For me, I have always been kind of that like results oriented
Mm,
person. And I feel that a lot of times in therapy, like not that there's no benefit, but for me, I wanted it to be like, this is probably a terrible way to put this, but like, when do we get to the point where I'm like fixed? Like, where's that? like when you fix that
oh
issue,
man, we
which
could
I
dive
know,
into that for a
I
while.
know, I know, I know. It's like any therapist listening to this is like, oh no, and I don't know how else to say it, but the point is like sometimes it felt like, and I've tried it. It felt like spinning your wheels, and I always
Sure.
got, I felt better. I had better success with coaches in the capacity that you're speaking of. Like it's like
Hmm.
a 6 month, a year, whatever it is, like a
Yeah.
defined period of time, and you're setting specific goals, and like here's I think a lot of it just comes down to the accountability, because
Hmm.
that's why I like having a trainer, like fitness trainer, because of the accountability. It's not that I don't know how to go to the gym, but like the accountability to go with
Yeah.
someone, and the variation in workouts and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, I mean, like those are the I guess the I don't know if that really answers the question, but like personal
Sure.
experience, I think I find sometimes it seems like with I understand people. You need to let them have their feelings, and like work through things without being rushed. But at the same time, it's like it sometimes felt like there just was no goal. Like no,
Mm,
we were just,
yeah,
like,
I can see that.
you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
we're talk about a thing. Okay, we'll talk about this thing again. Well, we talked about that thing last week. Like it's just kind of I and I know like people get a ton of value out of it and stuff. And I not telling people don't go to therapy. Like I'm a strong proponent for mental health. I think the reason I asked the question is because it's about like I guess probably finding what works for you, right? And so what works for me is
Yeah.
having find structure that may not be. So other people may feel like if they're trying to address a certain issue they may feel rushed in that. I don't know,
Sure.
but I'm just saying like that's kind of I guess where that question comes from.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I mean, this is a helpful way to distinguish coaching from other things. Like I could imagine having a conversation with you where on the one hand, I might say, hey, I know like you might come to me with an external problem or an issue. And that's typically why people seek out coaches. There's something external. I know I need to grow
Right.
the business. I'm having issues with employees, whatever. Um, and there's always something I have in common with therapists is we're going to go internal, and I'm going to make clear at the
Yeah.
beginning of the relationship. I may ask you questions like, "Hey, I see some emotion in you right now. Can you tell me about that?" And
Yeah.
I need you to trust me that that question is not a black hole. It's really important because it's not just about solving tactical problems. It's about making you more of a tactical problem solver, and shifting your perspective. Where my approach would be a little bit different is if I hear, earlier you said, I want to know when it's fixed. So the coaching approach to that, I would immediately just ask you, well, what would fixed look like? And
Right.
so then so in other words, eventually you're coming up with your own clarity and goals around, well, this is actually the outcome I want. This is why that matters to me. Here's how I'll know. And then I'm just helping you unpack that. And so really it's my role to help you build your own clarity rather than say, okay, if this is what you want, let me tell you how to get there. Um, yeah, that's a helpful distinction. I actually had a client once who I convinced, or I'm not convinced, I helped realize that they needed to go to therapy because they had clinical depression. And so I just spotted some signs, and we realized we're hitting a wall that neither of us are going to be able to brute force our way through. And so, the way to do that is I'll ask coaching questions like, what has your experience been with therapy? Very open-ended, right? And so they were able to say, I've thought about going, but I've never gone before. And then I might ask, well, what would you think about that? Do you think that's applicable to this? So I'm not telling them, I'm just asking. And eventually they did go and ended up getting on medication, and it was incredible for their mental health. And it's like the meds freed up some space in their brain to help them be proactive and forward thinking, because coaching is about looking ahead, and therapy is about that archaeology of understanding really why am I the way I am and putting that to rest. And so there is an interplay, but it's just so important but I think to sum up, I mean, that dependence, I don't want to cultivate that. I want people there's a meme that floats around every so often where it's like, eventually, if you do your job well, people will look up and think that they're the ones responsible for their own success. And that's really my goal. I want people internally to feel like, oh, I've got this. And that's when I know I've done my job.
Yeah. And I think some of the ways you put it, I think definitely there's a distinction in between therapy and coaching, and
Yeah.
like ultimately what you're trying to accomplish with those different things. And it's,
Yeah.
if you're like trying to grow your business, that's an external problem. And yes, your internal issues might contribute to some of the things holding you back there, but like
Yeah.
I think it's that the cultivation of dependence, I think, is kind
Mm-hmm.
of where
Yeah.
say what you said there is probably where I sometimes felt that like clinical therapy went.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's not for everybody, but I'm sure that's not the case for everybody, but that's kind of how it felt for me. And so that's when you we're just like a very tangent conversation, but I think it's
Yeah, that's
just kind
good.
of how it was. It's how I always felt about it, that it was like,
Hmm.
it always felt like I was just supposed to do this thing forever.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
kind of, I'm like, well, to me, that isn't actually like a resolution, which is maybe what I wanted out of, like I wanted them to ask that question. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in your bio, it says um, you're primarily serving construction, manufacturing, and trades
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah.
How does that? Why that specific niche? What's kind of what brought you there?
Yeah. It's kind of I won't say happenstance, but so, I'm part of a large firm, and we're divided up internally according to focus areas that are industry specific. So we've got healthcare, government services, public middle markets, franchise, and we have a construction services group that has grown just organically over the past few decades. And when our team, which is called, so my team's called Accelerate. I'm a director on this team, and we're small, but we do coaching, leader development. We'll do work on compensation true-ups. We've got a software platform for managing your workforce that we'll do. We have an executive recruiting arm, and so when we were first spun up inside the firm, our source of clients were Horn clients that knew our brand, but knew us as like a tax and accounting partner. They didn't think of us as a consulting or advisory partner. And so we just started reaching out internally and saying, hey, here's a bunch of things we can do now because we have this team. Do you have any clients that need this? And of course, the answer is absolutely, we do. And so the ball kind of started rolling. And eventually we realized that our construction team were just the most active, engaged, and excited partners. They were constantly bringing us to meetings, sending us referrals. And our firm went through a little bit of a restructuring at the end of last year. And so we merged. We just looked around and realized we're serving almost entirely construction clients. And so we shifted into that group and kind of refocused our marketing on that. My background personally, I've worked with kind of the gamut from professional services, nonprofits, manufacturing, everything in between. But it's been really fun to narrow down. You start to see a lot of the same problems, over and over again, and have the same kinds of conversations. And I don't have, like I've built a couple of fences, but I don't have a formal blue collar background. And so, other than like I mowed a ton of lawns in high school and college, but so it's been really nice to, build relationships with just these really salt of the earth, hardworking people that have built these businesses, family owned businesses from nothing, and just done really well. And typically where we work with people is they're at an inflection point, where they recognize, like, let's say they're second generation, or they're enough years into it that they're like, I just don't want patterns to continue. I don't want to have the same lack of work-life harmony, hitting my head against the same wall. We got to pivot. And so we'll come alongside them and help them. And yeah, I'm learning a lot. It's just really satisfying, and just all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the reason, part of the reason I asked that question is because sort of construction is in my background since
Yeah.
like a teenager, and now in real estate we we do a lot of value add, we do a lot of construction
Yep. Yep.
management through that, and so it stuck out to me. But I do think, like, I guess having you say that, I'm not shocked that that would be like a or a high client base, just because
Mhm.
it is a lot of that, like, starts from mom and pop,
Yeah.
grows up over a generation, and the ability to sort of turn that into a scalable business.
Yes.
uh that's it's a needed space. I mean,
Yeah.
I've worked for so many contractors, and it's like, most of the guys there, it's the working out of their garage or whatever. You show up at their house, or
Yep.
it's just, it starts that way, and then suddenly they're working 80 hours a week and making a lot of money, but don't know what to do with it. And how,
Yeah.
the
And they're
guys that they're hired.
unhealthy. They're not really that
Right.
happy.
Yeah.
They are, I mean, they're frustrated with the quality of, like, labor or subs.
Yep.
These are the things I'm seeing all the time. I mean, that archetype that you're describing is a dying breed, I think. I mean, there's fewer people entering skilled trades. They're struggling to hire and recruit. I think of, like, the job board that our executive recruiter, I mean, there's, like, the number of project managers, estimators, chief estimators, supervisors, like, the number of these positions that we're actively looking for is nuts.
Yeah.
And so for us, we also we have, like, a technology consulting arm too. And so we're really, like, it's a great industry. I think there's a lot of ways that, efficiency, having, like, focusing on employee experience and really treating people well and having some consistency and professionalism, it can go. And then, and nuts and bolts stuff, like teaching people how to delegate, and getting people's mindset to the point where they can accept 80% as good as how they would have done it, because that's going to help them scale. There's a lot of people, especially in the trades, that, the quality is so important to them, they can't let that go. And then they find themselves constantly taking things back or doing things themselves, and they become a bottleneck. And at the core of that, it's not information. They know they should do something different. They know the right answer. There's a mindset shift that coaching, and again, I'm not going to come in and just tell somebody, hey, here's your delegation plan, do this. I want to help them realize for themselves, my life can be so much better, and this company can be better if I can let go of this stuff. And that's, again, one of those powers of coaching, is I'm not coming in acting like I can tell them how to do their jobs, because I can't. But I can ask them questions to help them have self-awareness and realize, and then have their own, they'll come to the conclusions on their own, and that is one of the unique powers of coaching. And so, because coaching, I don't think, is all that common in the construction industry. I don't know if your experience is different, but, like, almost all of our clients have never worked with a coach before. And I love that, because I get to give them what I hope is, a really good first experience,
Right.
because there are so many people that do something called coaching, and it may be good, but I don't think that it's coaching.
Yeah. No, and that is, it is from my experience that I bring that up, because I just think it's like, I've never seen anyone in the construction world work with coaching. I'm sure some of the the larger,
Sure.
the guys that have managed to grow and have large scale construction companies
Or like the
have had
Lenners of the
some.
world or whatever. Like, I'm sure at
Right.
some level they're engaging coaches,
Right.
but yeah.
They must, but the guys that I've worked with and continue to work with, I do the bulk of the construction management for our real estate deals, and
Okay.
I know, like, I personally talk to all these contractors and
Yeah.
stuff, and, like, become friends with them. But I also just see, like, I see what I need from them. I see what really they need from, like, a business standpoint.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think having uh coaching to so many of them, like, they don't even really have a good way to do their paperwork, their estimates, their bids. Like, they just some of the
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
that should take 5 minutes, it takes them weeks. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yep.
I think they're just that type of
Or even just using a receipt like something like Expensify. Like I take for granted it's super easy to snap a photo, but there's a company we work with that until recently they just this one office lady would get a bunch of receipts dumped on her desk on a regular
yeah,
basis.
yeah,
And it's no wonder she's constantly frustrated. It's the least efficient process ever. And the key with coaching is to engage her in creating the solution. Because otherwise, as you know, people will stick with what's familiar even if it sucks, because at least they know it and at least they're kind of the owner of it. And so the nice thing about coaching methodology is I can actually let her like, hey, what do you want? Let's imagine your better future. And then we may have a technology platform that we can help you implement that will deliver on it. So I'd be curious from your perspective, like what are some of the main problems or needs? We've started touching on some of these, but like, what are the ones that you see with
yeah.
the GCs that you work with as an example?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that it seems to be a dying breed. I think
Mm-hmm.
just finding it's just finding manpower
Yeah.
is a huge part of it. And it's funny because we have the same struggles in veterinary medicine right now, where it's
Hmm.
the one of the big things I think a lot of people don't know is during the pandemic, the number of pets in the US doubled.
It was
And
huge. Everybody bought a pet.
yeah, like
Yeah.
everybody was bored at home and they're like, let's
Yep.
get a puppy. But at the same time, all of those vet clinics, like a lot of the staff and even the veterinarians left the field. So
Really.
you had an already strained workforce,
Hmm.
and then you have an increase in the number of patients to see, and then a decrease in the number of people to see them. And I know it happened in human
In lots of
healthcare as
other healthcare
well
areas
during,
too.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
like
so
during the
funny.
pandemic.
My wife works in healthcare, so it
Yeah,
mirrors
yeah.
that.
It was kind of across the board. It was obviously had a big impact in virtually every
Yeah. Yeah.
profession. But on the construction side and the GCs we work with, it's I think manpower is a hard thing to find. There's not a lot of people that are like going into the trades, right?
Hmm.
You don't
Yeah.
see. I couldn't tell you what the enrollment numbers are at the trade schools at this point. Then like if I assume they've dropped because
Yeah.
when I started 30 years ago, it was like fairly common that like in high school you might go to college or you might go to trade school,
Right.
but like I don't hear anybody talk about that. I don't hear any.
Yeah.
My kids are pretty young, but like I have friends, like I don't hear anybody talking about like, oh, my kid's going to go to trade school and be
Yeah.
a finish carpenter. My kid's going to go be a plumber or electrician. And the thing is like those things are so needed. And I know, you mentioned like someone, the quality is not as good and you find someone, but it's like it's a tricky balance to strike
Yeah.
because in the construction industry, specifically in certain things like finished carpentry,
Hmm.
things like that are as much a craft as they
Yeah.
are a a job. That quality matters, and it matters to
Yes.
the person who's kind of receipt, right? It's like if you're having a custom
You have
home
to
built,
look at it all the
right,
time
right,
after it's
right,
there.
right. Like if I have a custom home built, I don't want I don't want crappy carpentry, like in that.
Yeah.
And so, but I think what you're talking about is on the sort of technology platforms, things like that. Like what they have to figure out is how can I use my time where I can create good quality, whether that's me doing it or
Yeah.
training my guys to do it well, and not be buried in all the back end stuff
Yeah.
of the pile of receipts on someone's office, that
Yeah.
example, things like that. Like you have to look at the other things that are sort of creating that bottleneck, and
Yeah.
because it's like it's funny how I never really thought that these two careers paralleled, but it's so funny. Like what in the veterinary world, people want to help animals. That's it. Like that's why people
Hmm.
become vets. That's why they become vet techs.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of these trades, like especially the older guys, they want to create. Like they
Yeah.
want to, to them, it's as much an art as it is
Yep.
anything. And they
Seeing that
want
finished
to,
product is very satisfying. It's like, I did
right.
that, it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you go into this like terrible old beat up house and it's like, there's entire television channel based on this. Like obviously people care about it, right? Like
Right.
people want
Yeah.
to go see something terrible turned into something beautiful. And like
Yeah.
the people that can do that, it's important. Like it's important to,
Yeah.
because either we're going to have to build more houses or we're going to have to make the old houses livable. Like those are
Yep.
the two options because
Yep.
people need places to live. And it's just, so I do think it's like, it's an incredibly important, I guess, angle from a
Yeah.
coaching standpoint to help with those. I have friends that own a custom home building
Mhm.
company, and like I remember how it was like kind of. I think they've done some things in terms of helping their scale, but like when I know how much they were. Like I would check my email and be like, why am I getting emails from this guy at 1 in the morning? Like he was at my like, and I just know because that's when they can do the paperwork side of their job.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of what you're doing for the trades in the construction industry, I think is hugely important.
We love it. I mean, but yeah, to your point, like one of our clients is a really large oil and gas pipeline construction company. So, the kinds of safety considerations and technical knowledge and industry knowledge that's needed for like these positions we're helping them recruit for. I mean, it's tough to find. And then the reality is, I mean, depending on what region you're in and what you're doing, I mean, you could be in North Dakota, you could be in Houston, you could be somewhere else. It's just, it's the complexity is staggering. And, there's actually a lot of sophistication in terms of the ability to manage moving parts in different states all of the time and different client relationships. But it all tends to rest on just brutal hard work by a few heroic individuals. And that's the key that we're trying to help people see is like if one of you has a heart attack or one of you your spouse has a crippling health thing and you need to leave, then suddenly like a whole region might fall apart. And I don't want to see that happen. I want this to be sustained. You have good culture, and thankfully the people that work with us, like it's an investment. And I think they recognize that it's an investment that can help their margins significantly down the line, um, just because of the mindset shifts. And so and I'm just fresh off. I did a 1.5 day long retreat with the leadership team of one of these companies, and just getting the group together offsite for a 1.5 days, like they just don't ever do that. And so the power of having people in the room collaborating, breaking down barriers, having hard conversations to a certain extent, um, giving them some frameworks they can walk away and actually use to run different meetings and like think differently about hiring. I mean, it makes a palpable difference. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful for the work I do, but it's so needed in the industry. I think one of the things we're wrestling with is just convincing people that the investment is worth it, because I mean, for that 1.5 days that they're in a session, like there's so many fires that they're used to putting out and they're not working
Right.
on,
Right.
and the president of the company is very aware. He told them, he was like, I know what's happening to your inboxes while you're here. And so I
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I'm glad he was self-aware about that. But between that, or then some of these smaller operators who, they're making a lot of money and it's hard for them to imagine spending a certain amount. It's a lifestyle business in some ways. And so we
Right.
we tend to work with the larger, companies doing commercial construction, stuff like that, because they tend to understand it more. But I think industry wide, this kind of leader development isn't, I mean, just to stay competitive for people, like the people that are applying, if you can build a culture where they like really like you
Yeah.
and they have
Yeah.
a career path, and it's not just about cash compensation. I mean, there's a lot of other benefits and even just basic respect and like investment. Like the people I'm coaching, they understand it's an investment in them on behalf of the company. And I think the US needs more infrastructure. Like we need a lot more things built for our needs at home and to remain competitive, internationally. And so yeah, it's fun for me to think that I'm doing some small part in that, that there's maybe ripple effects through the people I'm working with. And I hope to do more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree totally. I think it is hugely needed. I think
Yeah.
it's a I, I have always been fascinated by the trades. I've like I said, I worked in construction. I can, I hate plumbing. I'm terrible at it. I don't know why, but all the rest of a building of a house, I can do it, and I enjoy it. But I think that like skilled trades and the ability to put it all together
Mm.
is like hugely important. And so, yeah, I think that I do think what you're doing is a very, very needed um, piece for for that industry, and and therefore
Yeah.
because of that the country in general, because we have things that need to be built. That's just how it
Yeah.
works. Like there's
Yep.
I don't care how much AI you get, like things need to be built, and at the end of the day that there's going to be somebody's hands on that. So
Yep.
um very cool. Well, Rory,
Yeah.
I love this stuff, but I don't want to keep you all day, and I want to get to
Yeah.
ask you the questions that I ask every guest. So the first one is, of course, based on the name of the show. Um, I ask every guest, what is your why? What are you, sort of what drives you? What drives you towards success? What keeps you going?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think I would say that's evolved for me. And so I think previously I would have said my why is just investing in people. Like I enjoy pouring into people, and coaching has given me a very specific way to do that. I mentioned earlier we have three daughters, and our oldest is going to be 6 in October, and then kind of on down from there. And so I've realized over the past couple of years, my why has shifted to building. I think of it as building expansive horizons for them. Like I want them to have a perspective on what's possible in the world, that like I had wonderful parents, but I want them to have a broader horizon, I think, than I had. So that's what motivates me right now.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I think sometimes I think I need to change the show's name to The Evolution of Why, because it really had, like, I've realized it in myself,
Yeah.
and then a lot of my guests too. It's like, you have at certain life stages different things are
Yeah.
driving you, and I think
Yeah.
like sometimes early on you're being driven by maybe negative, right? You're being driven by, I don't want to be poor anymore, or
Uh-huh.
I
Or I've
don't
got
want
something
to
to
deal,
prove. Yeah.
right, I don't want to deal with this addiction, whatever, like something, like
Yeah.
some challenge in your past. And then, of course, a lot of people, when they have kids, their why becomes family, and then it becomes, a lot of times, once that's all set,
Yeah.
you've got everything in place, like becomes impact. So I think it's cool to hear that, and for me, like I enjoy talking to people and hearing about that like evolution. So it's pretty cool. Um, Tell us something about yourself, and I may even just tell us something about yourself that isn't common knowledge. You touched on being in a band,
Yeah.
which is interesting to me, because I have nothing online, but was in a garage band. I just enjoyed it. I just loved music. So
It's so fun, man.
uh,
It's so
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Tell us a little bit about, it. Is this
Yeah. So the band is
someone I would have
called.
heard of?
Yeah, no, it's called Rory Tyer Band. Dave Matthews was basically an idol of mine when I first really started learning to play the acoustic guitar. You learn a few chords and stuff, and then you listen to him and learn what he does, and it's like I didn't know you could treat a guitar that way
Yeah,
and write really catchy songs. So that marriage of like unique musicality, and then the way he brought very talented people around him, and it made his songs more than they could have been. And then live, they kind of did that again. That was my philosophy. And so when we lived in Chicago, in particular, I had very talented guys. There's stuff on YouTube, on Spotify. Still, a few of my albums have fallen off, and I need to go re-register them. But yeah, it's kind of like a lot of folk and alt rock influences. But our more recent, the last album we put out was in 2015, and I would say that one's sort of like if the Killers and Third Eye Blind and Dave Matthews Band had like a love child, that's how we would sound.
That's, that sounds like pretty good. I'm going to check it out.
It's very fun.
Uh,
Yeah, that album, the EP is called Love in the Time of Social. And it was me just doing a lot of writing about what social media does to our brain. I met my wife on Match.com, so I was thinking a lot about like how the internet can both like make connections possible and absolutely destroy them,
Right.
depending on what you're doing. And that was proven out even more in, like 2020, I feel like was just uniquely polarizing election season, and social media drove a lot of that. And so if that's interesting to you, it's like a very fun album. My sister sings with me in a lot of the songs, and she's a songwriter in her own right. So it's on Spotify. Love in the Time of Social is what it's called.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely gonna check it out. Aside from the music, when people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
I'm pretty active on Twitter. So at Rory Tyer, RoryTyer. And that's probably the best place. I'm also on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there. I do a lot of writing about leadership and coaching and how to lead like a coach on both Twitter and LinkedIn.
Great. Last question for you, Rory. When people are getting started out, and maybe I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. If you feel like if someone's stuck in their business, right, because this is your area of expertise, how would you suggest that they kind of start to move the needle to get, kind of unstuck, to get out of that place that they are?
Oh, great question. So to answer this question, I'm going to give you a very condensed version of my definition of coaching, because I think you can coach yourself. It's more effective with a coach, but you can coach yourself. So coaching is a way of talking to someone that does four things. First, it grows their self-awareness. And so if you're stuck, I would say number one is you need to deepen your self-awareness. Understand what you're feeling and why. What does stuck mean? Why do you think that's the case? How's it affecting you? And situational awareness too, SWOT analysis, stuff like that. So coaching is that process. You grow in self-awareness. Number two, as a result of that, you gain clarity about what you want. And so if you're stuck, I would say, well, what would unstuck look like? What are the results that 6 to 12 months from now would make you feel I'm no longer stuck? This feels great. And so self-awareness leads to clarity about what you want. And then as a coach, I help people define coachable goals. And a coachable goal is a future state that's going to require you to change in some way to get there or to be okay once you are there. And so that coachable goal is really important, and you can work on that. Just do a lot of journaling and self-reflection by yourself. I help people give, clarity to that as a coach, but self-awareness, which leads to clarity, which leads to coachable goals. And then finally, regular forward progress and accountability. And if you're doing this on your own, I would say find someone to be accountable with you. Share, write down what you want, write down your goals, share them with somebody, and then say, can we just talk about this once a week or every other week? And just that act of returning to that eventually and problem solving with that North Star in mind will help you get unstuck. The super condensed version of my advice is find the one next thing you could do to give yourself back a sense of control. Because when you're feeling stuck, it's tempting to imagine that you're a victim. And even if you've been victimized, you're not completely a victim. There's some area where you can take control. And so find that one thing. But that process of self-awareness that leads to clarity about what you want, that you formulate into coachable goals, and then follow through and progress with accountability, that's essentially what coaching is. And you can do that process for yourself. That's what it means, I think, to lead yourself like a coach.
That's an amazing summary, and it's funny because back to our discussion on therapy, what I want to have happen in those situations is setting of coachable goals. Like when you said that, I was like, that's what I wanted. That's what and again, maybe that's just me. I don't know, but like I want to have those things that we can sort of put as a measuring stick that like progress is being made. So I love it. Rory, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, man. Love awesome. This conversation. This is great.
It was really a blast. Folks listening, I know you're going to love this one, get a lot of value out of it. Make sure you check out Rory and his music. We'll put everything in the show notes, but please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests. And thank you all for listening.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.